Both Sridhar's talk as well as Caleb's reminded me of a very interesting story of one of my favorite TED speakers, Ken Robinson. And he was talking about limitations as well. And here it goes. He was talking about a young kid who was part of a nursery, and it was drawing class. And the teacher said, draw something, whatever you feel like. And the teacher goes around the classroom, and she sees a little girl drawing some vague shape. And she asks her, what are you drawing, child? She says, I'm drawing God. Really? But nobody knows what God looks like. She says, you will know in 5 minutes' time. I think that was interesting because in many ways it resonates so well with the idea of what TED is about. We're exploring our world. I heard the introduction video of TED's earlier today. It spoke about two very fundamental characteristics, which is curiosity and skepticism. No idea worth spreading qualifies without these two traits. And as we go along, I'm hoping that the next 15 minutes will bring out both curiosity and skepticism from all of you here. When I explore the world, it's usually through two lenses that I'm very comfortable with. One is business, and the other is running, long distance running. I think most people in this room be more comfortable with business. We talk about long distance running at lunch. The reason is that, like anything else, business entities are a living, breathing entity that has a soul of its own. And very often, many of the things that we talk about in daily life can be brought back to these entities that typically have very large influences on what we do. So what is this about today? The title of today's talk actually takes a pot shot at a very well-known management book which was written at the turn of the century called From Good to Great by somebody called Jim Collins. His hypothesis in that book is that was really that good is the enemy of great, suggesting that contented mediocrity is very often a glass ceiling for many of the ambitions that companies can get to and the greatness that they probably can get to. He chose 11 companies to make his point in that book. And those 11 companies, he said, were headed for greatness. What is really interesting is that 15 years later, only one of those 11 companies has actually broken through the stock market numbers, has outperformed the stock market. 3 of them were in deep trouble. One of them is on your right-hand side. And one of them actually got sold. What is ironic is that Jim's magnum opus, which he wrote much earlier, was a book called Built to Last, which actually was even more well-known than this book. Built to Last talked about the characteristics of companies that give them durability. And so I asked myself, why is it that none of the 11 companies in his next book showed durability? Why didn't they last? And so I thought it might be worth actually contradicting Jim and asking ourselves the question about goodness and greatness. And I say to you that great is the enemy of good. Why do we say this? I asked the question whether goodness has actually a role to play in getting to greatness. And therefore, if you take a shortcut to greatness, right, without good, is it durable? This quote from King Lear, I don't know how many of you are familiar with King Lear, I think says it very well. Striving to better, we oft mar what is well. And we tend not to give value to what is well. But I think this is the more altruistic version of the theme. The more extreme version is what I like to call the helicopter syndrome. . Many people would like to be at the top of Mount Everest, correct? most people would like to take a helicopter to the top. That's the problem. So if we look at the many worlds that we deal with, whether it's our employees, our students, or our children, we tend to encourage them, without knowing it, to take shortcuts to greatness, and very often at the cost of goodness. Now we say, yesterday I had a cousin of mine I met, he says, what's wrong with that? Why should we not take the shortest cut? What will we lose? And so to examine that, I thought we might run through 3 sub-themes to figure out whether there is merit in the contradiction between goodness and greatness. One is value versus values. So is there really value in values? What is more valuable? What we do or who we are? And should we strive to be harvesters or planters? Now, to avoid making this completely philosophical, I thought we might do this through the lens of an organization, of an entity that probably has had something to do with the lives of almost everybody in this room at some time or the other. Let me ask you this question. When you think of the most valuable names in this country, which comes to your mind first? The most valuable commercial name in this country. You guys are business guys, right? Studying in business.
Mukesh Ambani.
Sorry?
Mukesh Ambani.
A brand name. Come on, I'm sure you can do better than that. The most valuable in this country, which one do you think it's? Yeah, in fact, it is the Tatas. And what do you think might be the value of it? The last value, as we know it, is $21 billion. When it was first valued, it was $11.5 billion, which is about 10 years ago. Why do you think it's so valuable? Let's ask this question a little different way. Suppose I were the owner of the group, all $100 billion worth of the group, and I would sell it to you. And I say to you, I will give you all the companies in the group, I will give you all the assets, all the products, people, structures, processes. The only exception being that I will keep the word Tata and the right to use the word Tata, and you cannot have it. Would you still buy it from me? Would you still buy it from me? Why not? Sorry? What would happen to your businesses that I gave to you, sold to you, if you are not able to use the word Tata in any form? Would you be able to raise money? Would you be able to get licenses from government with the same degree of ease? Would you be able to hire the same quality of people? Would you be able to go to governments abroad, and would they enable your entry into those countries with the same degree of ease? We can go on, right? And therefore, there will be severe impairment if you are not to have the use of that name. What was that name about? Why was it so valuable? And each of these has an element of money attached to it. If you're able to get a loan faster at a lower rate, 1, the cost of the project comes down. 2, the time to start the project comes down. And we can do this with all the 6 questions that we asked and bring it down to money. Is there value in that? So there's a tremendous amount of value in values. But when you ask ourselves the next question, what is more valuable? Who we are or what we do? Many of you in this room may not have been old enough to remember this campaign, but I know people in this room who probably have been involved in the campaign, right? This is an ad for Tata Steel, which is about 15 years old, I think. Yeah? Okay. What did it say? Do you remember this? It said, we also make steel. And what were they trying to say with this? That the products that we make, what we do, is not as important as who we are. And who we are is clearly inscribed in the things that we do for our communities, the way we treat our employees. For 50 years, they had a record of absolutely no labor problems in a place like Bihar, what was then called Bihar. Right? Who we are was far more important. Why do you think an investment banker, a hard-nosed investment banker, would have been willing to pay $6 billion to the 56th largest steel company in the world to go and buy the 5th largest called Chorus? Was it because of the performance of Tata Steel? Was it because of the balance sheet of Tata Steel? Was it because of the quality of their products, their state-of-the-art technology? Nonsense. We all know the answer. They were able to give the money blindfolded because they belong to the group. And what did the group stand for? For 140 years, they did not compromise on two words. Two important words. We call it trust, it's not. Integrity and compassion. These are the two words it stood for. They never compromised on that. And it's only now, many, many years later, at the turn of the century, that they actually decided that we need to value it, that it's a valuable business asset, that we must protect it. And so today, it is valued. Today, it's licensed out to the individual companies. I think many of you in this room must be knowing that the Tatas actually charge a license fee to individual companies for the use of the name Tata. Every individual company has to pay it. Not so much because they wanted more money for Tata Sons, who's the owner of the Tata name, but to get individual CEOs to recognize that there will be, as you mentioned at the beginning of this talk, impairment to each business in some way if it were not able to use the name Tata. Yeah? So there's impairment testing every year. How much have we gained or lost in terms of value? Which is why I told you about 11.5 to 21. Right? It is governed by a code of ethics. It is protected under law. And finally, today, you have somebody as senior as the GCC member, that is the group board member, called Mukund Rajan, who actually is in charge of the global Tata brand. It is no coincidence that he is also called the chief ethics officer. Do you see the connection? Their most valuable business asset is the 4 letters Tata. It is also standing for something which is not business, but it has value in it. It has delivered value over 140 years. It has allowed them to become one of the leading names in the world, the biggest name out of India. 70% or nearly 70% of their business today comes from international operations. Most of it is inorganic growth. They bought companies like Chorus. They bought companies like Tetley. They bought companies like JLR and turned it around, a dead duck which was going nowhere in 2 years. Why? Because the community believed and enabled that group to become what they are today. For 2 words, integrity and compassion. $21 billion worth. What lessons do we have from this? I think all of us at an individual level can draw from this. What can we draw from this? The last story that I have is as exemplary as it's exceptional. Because at one level, you will not find people like this. At another level, it really underscores the 2 themes that we spoke about. This gentleman, his name is Maman Chandy. He is India's leading hematologist by a mile. For 40 years, 4 decades, he remained with, including his education, at CMC Vellore. He studied there, he worked there. And over these 4 decades, he's had many temptations. And I know of late, many more very, very large carrots have been dangled at him by some of the best healthcare groups in the country. He refused to go. And when he finally did, in 2013, where did he go? He went to set up the Tata Memorial Hospital in Calcutta. That's the time he left. And he told the Hindu business line that I would never go anywhere where I have to compromise on what I believe in. And therefore I suggest to you, when you look at this, there are 3 things that might be worth remembering. One is that for all of us, what we are, who we are, is far more valuable than what we do. Always. And it will always be true. 2, there is great value in that, who you are. There's a lot of value in it. And therefore that gives you the strength, much more, to be a planter than a harvester. And I would ask you the last question that I want to leave you with, which is, if all of us want to be harvesters, then who will do the planting?